The Anunnaki didn't just come from one place. The Dogon tribe were interacted with another race of Anunnaki called the Nomo. These people came from Sirius B. The Emerald Tablets is a very spiritual writing about the fact that mankind's birthright is to be the light of the universe itself. These Emerald Tablets are authored by Thoth, the Atlantean priest king. He's known as Quetzalcoatl, Mercury, Odin, same person going everywhere on the planet. And everywhere he goes, he brings knowledge and wisdom. He claims to have built the Great Pyramid, 2 million blocks of interlocking stone. Isis was trying to create the Adamu, and the instructions for the cloning are in the hieroglyphs in Egypt. This begins the generations of Isis, the Genesis. There's a reason why we only get a sliver of reality, and so that we can stay sane. I saw these two entities right in front of my face. My brain was shaking in my skull, and I started screaming, but my mouth was silent. So they saw one of those outcomes for me and nudged me in a direction to collapse a particular reality on this planet. We know for a fact there were several great floods, dozens of unfinished megaliths all around the entire planet. Everyone who was working on these megalithic structures just stopped at the same time. There was this war going on in the Pleiadian star system, and whoever had control of the Tablet of Destiny had control of the whole galaxy. Our universe is a light wave shadow from a higher dimension. The world is opening up, and the people are ready to hear this information. Nobody's ever talked about this. The evidence that around 2010, I was working on a very huge project, and I only bring that up because that project, in my opinion, could maybe be connected to this encounter. I was building an underground base in Northwest Georgia, just outside of Elberton County, called Fort Terranova. As a matter of fact, it was on History Channel. I was featured on the History Channel back in, I think it was 2012. It's a Countdown to Apocalypse, the Nostradamus episode. And they were showing not only the shelters that we built, but the ones that we also were selling to other people who were looking to prep for potential disaster in the future. And I was doing this because I was studying the stars in the sky. I was studying the precession of the equinoxes. That's the movement of all the constellations across the sky over a 26,500 year period. And I realized that something was wrong with the precession, that based on the calculations that I was looking at, precession seems to be speeding up. So when I noticed that it had been speeding up, which would take it to about 25,000 years, which sounds like a small, insignificant number, but if you're in a foot race with somebody in the Olympics and you get beat by 1 second, that's a big distance, right? And so I knew that this was huge on a geological time scale. So the deeper I looked into it, it took me into understanding that there could be some type of a geological disaster based on past references to something like this happening in the past. And then I looked into what the astrophysicists had to say, and they started talking about the fact that they believe there's a nemesis out there to our sun. In other words, another star, potentially a brown dwarf star, that could be orbiting our sun every 3,600 to 4,200 years. This is actually actual astrophysics. And I'm going, this is incredible information. I've never heard of anything like this. So then they were saying that we potentially live in a binary star system at that time, and that they've been looking for this nemesis. This is NASA, the European Space Agency, official space agencies. This is not my information. And so because of this potential orbit, our sun picks up breakaway speed. So it slows down and speeds up, over tens of thousands of years. It does this cycle. But during the time of these potential cycles, when you look into some of the history, you begin to see that there are some catastrophes on Earth, huge mudslides, huge volcanic activity, huge storms, ice caps melting, and all these kind of crazy things start happening. So I figured, well, let me work on a project like this just in case there's some type of a disaster. There'll be a safe haven for at least 360 people, which is what it can hold. And so that's why I bring it up, because maybe it has something to do with that. But one day after working on this project, I'm sitting in my house. It's about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm just watching some sports updates on the news. And my kids, the house was full of people. At the time, I had 4 of the 5 children in the house. My wife at the time I'm divorced from her now, but she was in the bedroom on the first floor where I was located behind another wall. And I'm just looking at TV, and then the room turned kind of a lavender color, and the TV said, zzz, would just kind of shut down slowly. And I thought it was the boys playing a prank or a trick. So I turn over my left shoulder to look upstairs where they are, but they weren't there. When I turned back around, that's when I saw these 2 beings or entities right in front of my face. They were probably about 4 feet and change tall because I'm 6'4" and I was sitting on a standard size American couch. And so from my torso up would bring them up to about maybe 4.5 feet or something like that. But they were standing up and I was sitting down and they were leaned over into my face, almost like the gray aliens that you would see on a lot of these TV shows and so forth, and what we've been presented at would be a gray alien. Although they weren't really kind of gray, they were grayish. They were a little pinkish, a little bit, and then they had the slit for the ears, the nose, the mouth, and the eye coverings looked like coverings. They didn't look like eyes to me. They looked like coverings of some type of a manufactured thing. I couldn't detect if they had any kind of clothing or anything on. It didn't make any sense. It was all that one weird color. But what happened for me was they were not speaking to me in any kind of language, English, or telling me any commands that I can understand. But I literally felt like my brain was shaking in my skull. And I started screaming, and my mouth was wide open, but the sound coming out of my mouth was silent. It was just like air coming out. Like there was my sound, my vocal box was somehow muted. And so it was hard. It was a horrifying experience. It lasted for approximately, I would say maybe, I don't know, under a minute, maybe 20 seconds at the most, 25, maybe my best estimate. And then they just turned around and they just walked away, but they bounced. They kind of have this dangle walk. They don't walk like a normal human being gait. They just kind of dangled away like they were bouncing, almost as if gravity wasn't really affecting them the way for us. And they went through the wall. That wall to my left was the wall to go outside to the front of the house. And once they went through the wall, the lavender color went away. The TV came back on. I ran around the house looking to see if anybody saw or heard anything. It scared my kids. It scared my boys. It scared my daughters. It scared my ex-wife. It scared everybody. It scared me. It took me a while. It's been hard to talk about this for a long time. I used to break down and cry every time I talked about it. But recently I've been going to a psychotherapist and getting some help dealing with this trauma, because it really set a trauma in me, in my consciousness, and to talk about it more and to deal with it more. And I've been talking with someone to help address this and bring it out and really see what it was, so you can do the shadow work to get the anxiety that it gets. Because I would see TV series or movies that would have these aliens in them, and sometimes I would actually break down just watching the TV show or movie because it would bring me back to that moment. But long story short, I got off on a tangent there. When they left, the first thing that happened was I started hearing in my mind, worldwide telescope, worldwide telescope, worldwide telescope. It played back thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Finally, I got up. I went to my office in the house. I got on my computer and I went to excite.com. Back then, that was like the Google. It was the most famous search engine at that time, before Google got really big. And I typed in worldwide telescope, and the first search result was worldwidetelescope.org. And I passed that. I was like, oh my God. I click on it. I go to Worldwide Telescope. It's a website that has all the space probe data for all the missions that we have ever sent into space, including the rovers that are on Mars. And I was like, holy crap, this is incredible. So I saw first Mars panorama, Mars, and I clicked on Mars, and I saw panoramas on Mars. And I said, okay, click on panorama. Then it opened up to this other display and it said Opportunity Rover, Spirit Rover. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Opportunity Rover, click. It takes you into this location. I think I was in McMurdo Valley for Opportunity Rover. And I'm actually looking at the view of it from the mast cam of the rover. Of course, this is now pre-recorded imagery that has been stitched together in the system, but they did a phenomenal job because you can zoom in, zoom out, pan left and right. And as I began to do this, I started seeing anomalies on Mars, things that shouldn't be there, things that look like remnants of stone masonry that resemble the building blocks we see at Ollantaytambo or Sacsayhuaman in Peru, or some of the construction techniques in Egypt. And I'm blown away. And literally, that's what hyper launched me into ancient civilizations. I was already dabbling, but that connection of seeing that, getting this mental note, seeing that, And then knowing that this is incredible and then tying it to ancient civilizations. And I had already been thinking or hypothesizing that these ancient civilizations had advanced technology because we couldn't reproduce what we had saw. And that just hyper sent me directly into this topic. I went down the most craziest rabbit hole and started digging deep into these ancient civilizations. And I began traveling the world nonstop. I had taken a few trips by then, but now I was like sold. And I spent that since 2010 till now. I've been traveling the world. I've been around the world 18 times.
Yeah, I dare not call it a hobby. I know you refer to it as your ascension mission,
Yeah.
but I do wanna dive into the wisdom that is available on the other side when we sort of dive deeper into the ancient world. But just before we do that, any thoughts, any conjectures on why we lost so much information? Why there's such a disconnect from such an advanced level of awareness, advanced levels of technology to kind of where we are now? Yeah.
There's a couple of reasons. It's not just one reason. And I think the reason why people are kind of not getting the bigger pictures because everyone's mind decides to try to focus solely on one potential cause for the the I guess the amnesia. Well, the amnesia comes from several reasons. The first one being global catastrophes. Okay, so there were some global natural geologic catastrophes, like that we know for a fact there was a great flood. Not only one, but there were several great floods. We can see it in the rock strata. We can see that, yeah, this planet has been flooded several times. I just came back from Egypt and I went to the Valley of the Whales and I stood next to about a 30-foot long Basilosaurus in the desert, in the middle of the desert, right? And so this is an ancient whale, okay, an ancient whale laying, and there were hundreds of them all around me, dead whales, the bones everywhere, seashells and everything else. So at one point, that desert was obviously a sea. So it's like, man, what is going on here? So we know that this happened. The second reason is in the ancient Sumerian tablets and in the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Ring Veda, which is specifically where they have the Battle of the Ten Kings and many other ancient texts and tablets from around the world, you discover there was some type of a global war going on. There was a big battle. It even made it into the more recent religious texts like the Quran and the Bible. They're talking about the wars of the gods fighting in the sky, the angels going against God, and so forth and so on. These were real wars. In the ancient Sumerian tablets, these wars specifically talk about the fact that there was a weapon that was unleashed. And also the Mahabharata calls it the Brahmahama Astra. And this weapon created something called evil wind. Now, as this evil wind swept over the land, it said that the people's faces were turning, the skin was coming off their faces, their eyes were bleeding, their hair was falling out, and their fingernails were falling out. Sounds a lot like radiation sickness to me, right? And when you start looking for evidence of this, you look at Mohenjo-daro in the Indus Valley, Pakistan. You see that there is an area there where all the buildings have been turned to glass. These mud brick buildings have been turned to glass. The people's bodies are laying in the street right now, today in 2024. The bodies are still laying in the street. Some are even holding hands. This was an incredible war that happened. The bodies, the bones that are there, there's no evidence of scavenging of the bones and the bodies. There's just bones left now. But when you take a Geiger counter, they're higher than level. The radiation is higher than background level radiation on these bodies, which is why the animals never scavenged them. So we have evidence there. We have evidence in some of the deserts, like around Giza. You could pull up balls of glass out of the sand. That's 3,000 degrees temperature to turn sand into glass. So again, more evidence of potential weapons fire. When you look at the bent pyramid of Dozier, the bent pyramid looks like something impacted it and blew off a lot of the outer coating, and then just charred black remains of the pyramid strewn out about 50 yards around the pyramid itself. Nobody's ever talked about this. The evidence that there's some type of weapon or energetic charge had struck this object and blew it to pieces. Also at Pumapunku, you can see a megalithic structure blown up and the pieces strewn apart. So everywhere you look around this planet, I mean, I can just keep going. We discover that not only was there some type of war, but also you see dozens of unfinished megaliths all around the entire planet. Almost at the same time, Everyone who was working on these megalithic structures and these huge stones and these huge temples and some of these pyramids that are partially completed, they all just stopped. Everybody just stopped at the same time. To me, again, more evidence of some type of major war that was going on or some type of major calamity going on at the same time. And then the third reason and final reason is, as we got through all of that, and we're the survivors of that, you and I and everybody else on this planet, which makes us some of the strongest people to ever live, because we've survived all the plagues and all the disease, and we survived all these wars and disasters, and we're still here, right? And so it's amazing. But unfortunately, we as people have these rulers, these oligarchs, these elite oligarchs that rule over us and control the flow of information. Right now in the modern age, they control it through media. They control it through military. They control it through the Vatican, who has a 5-mile underground archive. And so what begins to happen is they want to control the narrative as to what happened in the ancient past, what they want to get out and what they don't want to get out, because they're looking to weaponize as much of the ancient information as they possibly can. Most of the weaponry and most of the fighter jets and the technology we have today was just a glimpse of what they were able to scavenge from ancient text tablets and scriptures and even other artifacts that they've discovered around the world, and turn those things, those concepts and ideas into actual real machinery and weapons. And so they didn't want us to get our hands on that. And so to that, they've hidden the past from us. They've acted like there's nothing there. They don't teach about the Sumerians in school and things like that. So what happens is you've got those three things working against us. And when you have that many things working against you, it's very easy by third, fourth, fifth generation to begin to forget all the information.
Inspired soul, just want to take a quick sec to thank all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. Thank you so much. And to all of you that are considering subscribing to the channel, please take a moment. It would do us a massive favor, championing love, positivity, and wisdom around the world. As I'm saying the word subscribe, the button below is lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution. Please hit the button, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, stay up to date on episodes like this coming out twice a week. And thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Back to Billy. I just want to double click on that for a second, because there is that proverb that ancient, knowledge is power. And coming into, forbidden knowledge, there's almost like there's like a forbidden power. It's almost like it's not meant to be placed in front of us, so that we're not allowed to reach for it.
Yeah.
Intentionally, what's the intention behind that?
Well, the intention is, you see, when you have a mass of people that you have to control and rule over, you do not want them to have a couple of things. The first thing is, you don't want them to have the same level of knowledge that you have. That's the number one first priority. Because if everybody has the same level of knowledge, guess what? We're all in the same playing field. Now, why are you ruling over me? Why is your boot on my neck? We're on the same level. I don't deserve to be here. I deserve to be here with you. But see, if we're all here, who's going to do the grunt work? Who's going to mow the lawn? Who's going to clean the chimney? Who's going to work in the factories to build the private jets for the oligarchs to buy and fly on? You see? So all of a sudden, you need people to do certain things in the world. You need them in their certain specific areas. And you need a class of people at the bottom, in the middle, and at the top. The next reason is, there is a certain level of, I would say, security risk issue. In other words, if I know how to obtain plutonium and build a nuclear bomb, well, then that's a big problem. I mean, there are some real security risks and issues. If I know how to build a particular type of a flying device that has weapons on it, and I can now get over the walls of your city, just because I want to, and I can destroy something, well, that is a big issue. So there are other reasons why a lot of information is also suppressed, and technologies are doled out to us at a very slow pace, while they themselves have super advanced technology. I think that they're about 300 years ahead of us right now. So there is a real reason for global security as to everyone having access to everything and all technology. I do believe in that. But then the other reason is it's just the fact that when you have people, the next thing is you want them to be ignorant so they can fight amongst each other. When you have them fighting amongst each other, the biggest tactic and the most ancient tactic is the divide and conquer tactic. And when you have the divide and conquer tactic in action, and it's been in action for eons now, You have us going against each other so that we can't see who the real enemy is. We can't rise, we can't come together and then rise up and realize we are the ones who have to take control of this planet, and that they need to be servants to us, not the other way around. The governments and the politicians and everything, they're supposed to be public servants and to serve us and to hear the needs of the people and to help apply those needs. But they've got it flipped around where they're actually controlling us at every turn. What we hear, see, smell, touch, say, what invisible line we can cross, what invisible line we can't cross, talking about borders. And so all this stuff is going on, but it's all about control. So they keep us in this situation. They keep us in these pens. They keep us fighting each other. They keep us ignorant, and they hoard all the technology.
It's really interesting when you start looking into even just the etymology behind the words, right? Like governmental, and then it's like governmental is like govern your mental, and it's like whoa, wait, wait,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. That's like you're not even. That's like just hidden in plain sight. Like relax, like,
Yeah.
yeah. It's almost like a slap in the face to some degree. One of the
Mhm.
I'm going to try and frame up a question, see if I can get it right. So you've had your encounter experience, and there
Mhm.
was so many questions in around that because it seems like it activated something. It definitely tapped into a vein of curiosity, but you started receiving downloads. I don't know if they're
Yeah.
intuitive or if they're telepathic because obviously you're going to look at the telescope. But in there now at this particular, so that's part one of the question. But part two is you mentioned like information has been suppressed for the longest while, but then I see the work of someone like yourself, and it's now like people are waking up to this information. There's a
Yeah.
thirst and there's a hunger for it, and if it was locked down for so long, obviously there's been some form of shift or unlocking or something that is now making this more accessible to the masses. I don't imagine it's
Yeah.
without risk, but nonetheless there is an appetite for it and it is coming to the fore. So something shifted for you. Was Do you think part of what happened in that encounter or whoever you saw is supporting the information share? Is it an allyship, or is it like it just happens to be that the time that we're in now that activated something and they're completely unrelated? But nonetheless, there is, what is shifting for humanity then in that vein in terms of the information being more widely received now and accessible for people?
Yeah. I really believe that this occurrence, this situation that I was in with this contact was planned by them, but to push me or nudge me in a specific direction. To what agenda and for what reason, I'm not sure. All I can tell you is that the effect that it had on me definitely shot me off in the trajectory that I'm on now, probably faster than I would have gotten there if I had never had the encounter. Now I go back to 1977 when I had my first encounter, which was just a sighting. I saw a UFO fly over my backyard in Miami. I was living next to the Opelika Airport. This is 1977. And I had just moved down from New York. I used to watch the planes fly over the backyard because we lived right next to the small private airport. And when this thing came across, it cleared the horizons in seconds instead of minutes. Now, the other planes would go, really. So most of them were prop planes back then. We had a lot of prop jets in the 70s and make a lot of noise. And you could just see them going over. This thing went right across the sky. Then it came back and then it stopped much lower the second time, completely silent, like an elongated egg, glowing metal. And then it went out the way that it came in a blink of an eye. I ran in the house. Oh my God, Mom, you can't believe what I just saw. And I told her what I saw. And she said, Son, in the ancient past, there were advanced beings here. This is in the 70s, my mom. This is why I dedicated my first book to her. She said, You have to go to Machu Picchu. She said, In ancient times, some of these beings would live on the tops of mountains. Okay. So that also inspired me. So that was my first sighting. Then fast forward to this second sighting, this real, like, close encounter of the fourth kind almost situation. It sparked something else in me to another level. So my mom helped spark me. That UFO sighting helped spark me. My mom helped instill it in me like it was okay. What you saw was real, and I believe you. So she gave me the belief like I wasn't crazy. And then this sighting happened, and this contact experience, I'm sorry, happened, and it just sent me off into a trajectory. And I believe that maybe they saw something in me, particularly. Maybe they have the ability to see potential outcomes, like in quantum physics. You can see everything exists in superposition, so you can see that there are multiple potential outcomes that exist. Maybe they saw one of those outcomes for me and nudged me in a direction to collapse a particular reality on this planet. I can only hypothesize. But like you said, everything is coming to the forefront. and and so we're getting there now. And I remember having to sneak in the bushes to talk to two friends about what I saw, to keep it quiet from everybody else. So they live in a very rough neighborhood. If they heard me talking about this kind of stuff, I might get into a fight. And then fast forward a few years, we were exchanging VHS tapes. And then we were exchanging cassette tapes this is with conspiracies and alien information on it, right? And then we were exchanging CDs and DVDs. Then it went to web forums, then blogs, then the internet. Then I ended up on TV. And now I've been on, I don't know, over 1,000 TV shows. So now I have my own TV network. I mean, and I could talk about these topics openly where just 5 years ago, the hate was like through the roof. 10 years ago, people wanted to attack me, for talking about this kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden, I'm on the Travel Channel, the History Channel, and the Discovery Channel at the same time on 3 different types of shows talking about these amazing topics. So the world is opening up and the people are ready to hear this information.
So you do think there's a shift potentially in consciousness that's going on?
Yep. Massive shift. See, our solar system, it orbits the Milky Way galaxy on one of the outer rings. Now, as it orbits, it doesn't just stay in a flat plane. Our solar system itself undulates like a wave in the ocean. But each of these undulations is millions of light years, right, in different directions. Now, every so many, I forget the total number of, you can look in the astrophysics book, maybe Google it, but every so many tens of thousands of years, let's say at least, it reaches the galactic equator. Our solar system reaches the galactic equator, perfectly aligned with the supermassive black hole at the center, which is sending out high charged particles directly at us, right? So we're getting all these energetic particles, which are not only penetrating us, but also affecting our DNA. And I think that during this cycle that we're in right now, these are the cycles that occur every so many tens of thousands of years that allow mankind to go through an awakening cycle, through the Yuga cycle, on the side of the Yuga going into the Silver Age, heading back into a Golden Age.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines.
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. It's interesting because we get into the astrophysics and I'm following, and then there's also your theories on the fractal holographic universe. And so for the layperson looking at it from the outside, like it's almost implies like when you get into astrophysics, it all seems very real and very matter and very particulate and very bodies of mass. But then just connotations of fractal holographic universe, the word hologram implies
Yeah.
somewhat that reality is not real. So can you help me maybe explain fractal holographic universe and help us bridge across?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, we're talking about fractals. We're talking about patterns that repeat themselves in smaller self-similar patterns. And we can see that throughout the entire known universe. And this mathematician and scientist named Benoit Mandelbrot, he recognized this to the level where he came up with the Mandelbrot equation. And it's an equation for a fractal, right? It's a very simple one-line small equation, kind of like E equals MC squared, very small equation. But this equation explains the formation of stars, galaxies, the formation of human beings in any life form, plants, trees, life, anywhere throughout the known universe. Even the position of clusters of galaxies in correlation to each other as they move through the known universe. It even predicts the location of mass within the known universe. And this simple mathematical formula was imported into a animation software by Pixar Studios. And Pixar then became one of the top animation companies in the world because they were able to create these incredible realistic looking cartoons that didn't have to be made one scene at a time by an artist. The actual software creates every scene as it needs to be made. It creates the sky, the moon, the plants, the mountains, even the characters and their movements are all created as it needs to show up. So what they did was they realized that this world or this universe is running on this same fractal mathematical code, and that even ourselves as human beings in this realm, in the third dimension, the next scene actually appears as we need it. Scientists looked deep into this. They started realizing something with the double slit experiment, that when you are not looking at electrons or small particles, they actually only create themselves or turn themselves into waves of potential outcomes. But when you begin to look at these particles like electrons or photons, all of a sudden they collapse themselves into digital bits of information. This is something called the double slit experiment, right? And they were doing this because they were shooting little electrons through slits in a microscopic box and see if it was going to make a pattern on the back wall. But when they weren't looking, in other words, when they didn't have a camera inside the box to see what was happening, these electrons were operating as waves of light, hitting the wall and creating a wave pattern. And they said, how can this be? How can two digital bits of information then turn into waves of potential and strike the back wall, giving us an idea that they collided with each other and somehow made a wave pattern. But when they put a camera inside to look and see what was happening, it collapsed back into digital individual bits of information again. So they discovered something amazing, that electrons are conscious. And that because electrons are conscious, they can make a decision, which means that everything in the universe that has an electron, every atom that has an electron orbiting it is also conscious. And so we're living in a very conscious universe, but they looked even deeper into the heart of matter. And they saw that you can see the largest piece in the smallest scale. And so that the only thing you lose is resolution as you zoom in. How does a hologram work? If you look at a hologram and go to the smallest piece of a hologram, you'll see the entire image in the smallest piece. So they said, wait a minute, we might be living in a holographic matrix of sorts. So they dug deeper into that and they realized that we are living in a holographic matrix. Everything that appears to be solidity or solid matter is actually an illusion. It's all holographic energetic fields, electromagnetic fields interacting with each other, because they discovered that solid matter like this microphone or this table or this screen is only the illusion of solidity because these atoms that make this up are 99.999% empty space. There's no microphone here. And the only thing we have are fields of energy, fields of light and repulsion. And all these electromagnetic fields repelling each other, and waves of light or photons slowed down to a particular frequency gives us the illusion that this microphone is here. This illusion of touching. We don't touch anything. We only repel. So the electrons in my fingertips are repelling the electrons in the microphone, giving me the illusion that I've actually touched it. And so this is telling us, as quantum physicists, that this universe is a fractal holographic matrix of light. And it doesn't mean that we're not real, but what it means is that a lot of these ancient texts and tablets and even the Bible and the Quran and everything else is accurate. We're living inside of a creation. But what the fractal holographic universe theory tells us is the method used to create this universe and this dimension specifically.
Can you explain more about the method used? Because I've got so many questions going on right now. Like, one of the things that just dropped in for me was even just the fact that the Mandelbrot equation is almost like, well, it's maths to, is it safe to say that's maths to the second law of Hermetic, like the second Hermetic law? As above, so below. You're kind of watching Mandelbrot do that. Is like so true. My brain just did that. That's incredible. Thank you for that gift. But yeah, like, what is the nature of our universe? Because one of the question, or how did it come to be? Because one of the questions that was naturally forming for me was in terms of, I often wonder, because there's so much disbelief around like encounter experiences from one individual that hasn't had an encounter experience towards someone that has. And
Yeah.
part of me wonders if there's, like, I've got one of my best friends, his kid is colorblind. Yeah, and he's the sweetest soul. Like, he's an absolute G about it. Like, he's 4 and he takes it in his stride almost as if it was a blessing. Yeah, and I was just like thinking about this the other day. Like, if there were potentially certain individuals with certain, like, because everything we see is within a certain range and bandwidth. One of my favorite tripped out things is to just listen to, like, pull up a YouTube video and listen to like sound going from 0 hertz to 20,000. And your sound, your hearing only kicks in around 1,000, 4,000 hertz, and then it taps out at about 14,000. But there's still sound happening on either side.
Yep.
You just don't have the faculty to pick up on it. And so I do wonder if there's certain bandwidths of perception that other people are open to, or more susceptible, more perceptive of, that affords them certain experiences that other people don't. And I'm sure that's likely the case. Like, dogs hear differently, cats see differently. Like, that's happening. So I always wonder if maybe that's part of where certain people are open to it and can see certain things, and maybe it's a hardware thing. And the reason I bring up a hardware thing, because I know if we're going to talk about how the universe is created for you, that's the software. But then also I think there's a hardware thing because quantum has said that the mic is mostly air and space, or empty space, or space void. I don't want to say empty space, but I can't move through it. So maybe that's just my hardware that's sort of dictating how I interrelate with it. So I guess I'm asking 2 questions at once. How did the software come to be? But then also, the hardware question.
Right. Yeah, we don't know how the software came to be, but what we do know is that scientists were able to replicate something called a quasi-crystal in a laboratory setting. And this quasi-crystal, they created an 8th dimensional quasi-crystal. Now, when they started experimenting with this 8th dimensional quasi-crystal, when they put it into a specific angle, it cast down a 4th dimensional quasi-crystal. And when they positioned the 4th dimensional quasi-crystal into a specific angle, it cast down a sphere, which is what they say is our universe. So they're saying that our universe is a light wave shadow from a higher dimension. So that's the method. That's the potential hyperdimensional technology being used to create this universe itself. Could be that we are a shadow from a higher dimension. A shadow made of light, though, not a shadow like you're casting a shadow on the ground, but a shadow made of light. It's really interesting stuff. And like I said, we don't touch anything. It's repulsion. Everything in this entire universe is all about repulsion. When you connect with something, the reason why you can't go through it is because the electrons orbiting the atoms in your fingertips are creating this field. And that field is repelling the field that's in the electrons orbiting the atoms inside the microphone. So it's all electromagnetic repulsion that's going on. It's just really incredible. Now, we get back to the sensory perception. So we only can see, human beings can only see less than 1% of the light spectrum in most cases, right? But not all human beings. But so what do we get to see? We get to see red, green, and blue predominantly. I mean, that's not a lot. We don't see gamma rays, X-rays, infrared, ultraviolet, multispectrum. We don't get to see all these different things that are going on all around us. Microwaves, we don't see. If we could see microwaves with the amount of cell phone technology out here right now, we'd probably go crazy if we could see microwaves because they run on microwaves, right? So there's a reason why we only get a sliver of reality, and so that we can stay sane. That's my personal belief. But I do believe that there are people talking about a hardware issue that for whatever reason, the way they are configured, the way their eyes and their brain is configured, and even their other sensory organs, it's somehow they're able to peer a little bit deeper, just ever so slightly deeper into what's already here. In other words, they're not seeing anything that doesn't exist. They're only seeing a glimpse of what already exists here, right? And so there's a very small number of people that have these abilities. They have these abilities because why? Because their eyes and their ears and their hands or whatever, their sensory perception system is just a little bit more in tune for, the actual universe as the way it is right now. So it's a great possibility. And it's a great thing to talk about people who have these extra gifts. But I think we all have these gifts. We haven't really been able to tap into them because I think, we've been disconnected from a lot of our gifts. We've been disconnected from the magnetite crystals in our brains. We can't sense magnetic fields anymore, even though we have the crystals in our brains to sense the magnetic fields. They put a person they put a person inside of a laboratory setting with a huge bar magnet, and they began to move the bar magnet around as they put the sensory cap on the man's head, and the crystals in his brain reoriented to the magnetic field. But he didn't feel anything. So, but in the ancient times, we probably were able to use magnetic navigation with the Earth's magnetic field, like turtles and geese and everybody else. So we've been disconnected from a lot too.
Yo, Inspired Soul, quick question time. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What is your biggest takeaway from this conversation? Billy is covering a lot of ground in this conversation and so many different topics of conversation: hidden truth, ancient civilizations, ancient wisdom, intergalactic forces. This is really interesting. I'm still digesting and processing a lot of this conversation, so I'd love to hear from you. What are you taking away from today's conversation? And as you'll hear at the end, he's keen to come back on, so we're going to have another opportunity to have some more chats with Billy. And so I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask Billy, I would be honored to ask them on your behalf. So please feel free to leave your questions below. With that, back to Billy. Okay, wow. So being disconnected from so much, there seems to be a real calling in your awareness to these emerald tablets. Can you describe to us the emerald tablets and why they're so important? And I'll just leave that as the question.
Yeah, the Emerald Tablets is one of the greatest writings that have ever been released to mankind, in my personal opinion. Some people doubt their existence. Well, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, or the singular tablet, is located at the Cambridge Library in the UK. And then the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which is the full tablets, all of the multiple tablets, they're located at the Vatican Archive in Rome. These tablets have passed through the hands of people like Sir Isaac Newton, the Queen of Sheba, Roger Bacon, and many other incredible academics over the years, over many, many years. And several translations of them. Even St. Thomas Aquina put out his own translation of the Emerald Tablets, right? So this is leading into it, getting into the Vatican. St. Thomas Aquinas was one of the last people to have his hands on the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. He made his own translations of them, wrote his books about the Emerald Tablets, and then the Emerald Tablets disappeared. My presumption is into the Rome Vatican Archive at the Vatican. But these Emerald Tablets are amazing because we're talking about texts that potentially could be 36 to 40,000 years old, authored by a man named Thoth, Thoth. He calls himself in the tablets Thoth, the Atlantean priest king. He doesn't call himself a god. He never proclaimed himself to be a god, even though the people called him a god. The people deified him. Because when he would leave an area and not come back for a while, he was so wise and so incredible in his teachings that they figured he had to be a god. The word thought comes from the name Thoth. And when he got to the land of Kemet, he taught chemistry and alchemy. There is one of the first places he taught chemistry and alchemy. Kemet is pre-dynastic Egypt. He went all around the world teaching humans languages, construction techniques, and he claims to have built the Great Pyramid. He says in the Emerald Tablets, "Builded I the Great Pyramid, patterned after Earth's force, so that it too might remain through the ages." And it has. Khufu had nothing to do with the building of the Great Pyramid. Khufu was a pharaoh in the dynastic era who took claim to the pyramid, which is something that the pharaohs would often do. They would take claim to a temple or other monuments and put their name on it and erase the other person's name and say, "Oh, this is mine." They would even steal each other's graves. If they can find a nice tomb from another pharaoh, they would take the pharaoh out of there, put their name on it, and take that pharaoh's tomb too, as if they had it built for themselves. So this is a common practice. Khufu never touched or had anything to do with building a Great Pyramid. And so this thing is really, really ancient. And the evidence of this can be found all around the sands of Giza. Again, all the fossils that are laying around out there, the evidence of weapons fire and everything else that shows us that this thing has been around here for a very, very long time. But the Emerald Tablets is a very spiritual writing. It's talking about the fact that mankind is birthright is to seek the light and to be the light, not only of this world, but of the universe itself. And it's a very uplifting and enlightening text that really inspires mankind to be the best version of themselves. And that's why I love it so much.
There's so many questions that open up from there. Does it tell you anything about the origins of where we've come from?
It doesn't specifically talk about the origins of where we come from, because in the opening scene of the Emerald Tablets, Thoth is told by his father to travel to the land of Kem and to take on the mission that he knows of. And the mission was to help rebuild civilization because there was a great flood. So as he gets into the great ship of the master, he doesn't sail out on the ocean. He goes up into the sky until the earth disappears. And then he reappears where he sees the land of Kemet beneath him, and he descends from the sky down to the ground. And as he opens the doors, he called them hairy barbarians. The hairy barbarians came to attack him. So he raised his staff and sent out a ray of vibration, stopping them still as fragments of stone of the mountain. So he had some type of a non-lethal stun gun at that time, kind of similar to what we have now today called the active denial system in the military. But these people were hairy barbarians. By the time he got to them, several generations must have passed or something. They had lost their technology, lost their knowledge, lost their wisdom and understanding. And he came there to teach them how to become civilized again. And he brought them back up to a high level of civilization. Then he said to his crew, now that we've accomplished this here in Kemet, spread out around the world and duplicate what we did here. And that's why you can see pyramids and temples with the same construction technique no matter where you go all around the world.
What do you think informed him to be able to be so wise, to be able to help civilizations actually form civilizations?
He said his teachers were the seven lords, and of course also his father. And these seven lords were some of the, I guess, extremely wise ancient beings who gave him the wisdom. He was an adept initiate of their mystery teachings and one of the best students they ever had. And he had learned the ability, he had gained the ability, according to him, to incarnate at will on and in any plane he desires, which means he can incarnate into other bodies, and he can even incarnate into higher dimensions if he wanted to, or come back into higher dimensions, or take himself into higher dimensions, which is just wild. But that's his claim.
Is there stories of potentially him leaving and coming back into his body? Like, is there any documented of that?
There's stories in the Emerald Tablets where he actually goes on a trip to the gates of Arulu outside of his body, astral projection, and he gives you the codes, the cymatic frequencies to utter at the gate in his tablets, which I have in my book, the compendium of the Emerald Tablets. So you utter these codes, and that allows you to pass. These frequencies allow the gate to open, and he even tells you a technique to spend a very small amount of time out there and how to get back to your body. He talks about the fact that through this method, he was able to travel to many worlds and watch civilizations rise and fall on many planets. And he said they were all men. He said he watched many men on many worlds and watched their civilizations rise and fall. That's an incredible feat. I don't think people 36,000 years ago had the time, the energy, and the effort to sit down and write a sci-fi movie. I think they only wrote down things that they felt were real.
Well, also just the technology of writing. It's so interesting because also with the fractal holographic universe theory, like you mentioned, even like the building blocks of nature, like the flower of life that we see in so many ways. Also, the Dogon tribe, like much more recent than obviously the Emerald Tablets, but even they had this. Like, how did they know? Like, maybe you can describe what they know, but like it's the sacred geometry that they had access to. It's so
Sacred
weird that
geometry.
people know stuff that is just suppressed.
Yeah. They knew stuff that we are just finding out today. We don't have any original ideas right now. There are no new inventions. None. Just the truth. There's no new invention. Not one invention that has come out is new. They all have existed before. We only rediscover what has already existed. Like it says in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun. That's a very true statement. I believe in that statement. And so these beings, they understood that at every Planck length, which is the smallest measurable space and point in space-time, a Planck length, extremely, extremely small. At every Planck length in space-time exists a flower of life. And those flower of life patterns are the energy source that emanate through the vesica piscis, through the connection or the intersection of the circles, energetically emanate life into the third dimension. The concept or the idea, they knew this, of this macro evolution was never a reality to the ancients. They understood that micro evolution is real. In other words, changes, being able to adapt to your local environment over time. But to say that we came from an amoeba to a fish to a monkey to a human, they didn't believe in that, and neither do I. I really do believe that this energetic field, this grid, this smart grid with divine energy is pouring fully formed life forms into existence throughout the known universe to some extent. And yes, there is an evolutionary process, but we didn't come from a monkey. Okay, we didn't come from a monkey that decided to stand up and walk away from a tree. Just didn't happen that way. In my personal opinion, I believe that we were created to be in this format as a hominid that can walk and stand up upright. And this format of body, this hominid, upright, bilateral, bipedal hominid body, is prominent throughout the known universe according to the ancient texts and tablets. So when the Anunnaki show up, and there were people here already. They didn't create the people from scratch. We were already here. In the Epic of Atrahasis, Enki says, there's an existing being here. We can take it and teach it to do the load or bear the load for the Igigi. In other words, make us into slaves because they were tired of working. We were already here. All they did was add their essence to us in the tablets, which means they genetically tinkered with us and they got us to do the work for them. They got us to revere them as gods. So this body type, I believe, is prominent throughout the known universe. And there's one more text that talks about this body type in the Terra Papers, an indigenous Native American ancient text which talks about the formation of life forms, not only on Earth, but on other planets, and which body types were able to evolve with hands, bipedal, bilateral, forward-looking eyes, to build ships and travel into space. And eventually, unfortunately, some of these civilizations went to war in space, just as the Mahabharata and the Indian Vedas talk about. They have the same exact story in the Terra Papers.
Very interesting. So we've got already an existing species on the planet that was potentially more, like you said, like with evolution, fish, and then we got come to monkey. But then at a certain point, you reckon there's been maybe it's like some form of gene splicing that has then afforded us to like become a different species altogether? Like there was an intervention to some degree.
The exact mystery of how a human being got here. We weren't Homo sapiens sapien. Our cousins that were in ancient times weren't our exact version of human. We know this though because we've found a lot of these hominid bones all around the planet. However, exactly how we were created to be here, not exactly sure. But all the indigenous cultures around the world say one thing that's really important. They say that we were seeded on this planet. We were brought here to this planet. The Aboriginals, the Hopi tribe in the Americas, the Lakota tribe, the indigenous tribes of Bosnia, right? The indigenous tribes of Africa, they're all saying the same thing. They were seeded on this planet by Pleiadians. That's their handed down verbal history, not mine. Now you look at it, you say, man, so people might have been brought here. Then you have the Anunnaki arriving around 450,000 years ago, but they didn't tinker with human beings until about 200,000 years ago when they were going to go to war against each other because they got tired of doing the labor. One group felt like they were being enslaved, even though they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were called the Igigi. The other group was like, no, y'all do the work. And so the other group with the mass of people, they said, no, we're not going to do the work. Matter of fact, we're going to kill you. So this war almost happened against Enki, Enlil, and Anu, the gods of Earth. And then Enki says, I have an idea. Let's take the existing hominid and add our essence to it. We'll slay one of the gods with the hominid and with the being. They call it a being. We'll slay one of the gods with the being. That means we're somehow going to take something out of the god, one of the Igigi. We're going to take their DNA. We're going to take their life force. We're going to mesh it with this hominid, this being, and we're going to create a worker race, which is what they did. And they did this through the Hathors, coming out of the birthing chambers which are located in Egypt. And I take people to this place every single year when I take my big tours, where they had the birthing chambers in several different places, where they were actually creating Homo sapiens at a very rapid pace. And we began to become the slave race that began to do the work for these beings. In other words, what was the work? Clearing out the Tigris and Euphrates, digging canals, helping to build the cities, and doing all the farming and animal husbandry. And we have the tablets that actually show these huge beings giving the plow to mankind. We have them showing us all these things. The Dogon tribe were interacted with another race of Anunnaki called the Nomo. That's what they call them. These people came from Sirius B. So the Anunnaki didn't just come from one place. They came from many different planets around different stars. They came from the Sirius B. Sirius B was a star that ran out of fuel, became a white dwarf. You can't even see Sirius B with the naked eye, but the Dogon tribe knew about it. They knew exactly where it was in the sky. They also knew that it was in a trinary star system and the orbital periods of the trinary star, the intricate orbit. How in the world could they know this? I mean, they knew all this information. They knew the planets in our solar system, the shapes, the sizes, and the colors and the orbit patterns for every single planet in our solar system, long before we had telescopes. And all of them, the ancient Egyptians, the Dogon tribe, which actually the Dogon tribe was one of the very first inhabitants of the land of Kemet before they got overthrown and were forced into Mali, Africa. So they had the ancient knowledge of the wisdom of the flower of life and the energetic pattern, and so did all the other ancients. Everywhere around the world, you find the flower of life. I don't care if you go to Mexico, which is former Mesoamerica, where you had the Teotihuacan civilization. And what does Teotihuacan mean? It means the city of Tahuti. Who's Tahuti? Thoth in Africa. So this man has been everywhere. In Australia, he's known as Thothamabi. In Mexico, he's known as Tahuti. He's known as Kukulkan. He's known as Viracocha. He's known as Quetzalcoatl. In the UK or the Europe, he's known as Mercury. He's known as Odin. I mean, this guy's been everywhere. Same person going everywhere on the planet. And everywhere he goes, he brings knowledge and wisdom. He's even potentially Wang Di, the first emperor of China.
Where you've got these potentially beings, like this is hundreds of thousands of years ago. But then why Earth? What's special about Earth? Why is everyone attracted to Earth? Is
Great
it our
question.
water? Is it our
Yeah,
minerals? Is it our elements? What's going on?
Yeah, really good question. So when you look at these ancient texts again, you discover that there was this war going on in space. This war appears to hail from the Pleiadian star system. And I have myself been collecting artifacts. Some of these artifacts have been on TV shows. 70% of my artifacts have the Pleiades on them, right? These are ancient artifacts. And so this Pleiadian star system is very, very powerful and intrinsic into the full story. They talk about it in the biblical text. It's talked about in the Quran. It's talked about in Sumerian tablets. It's talked about in Egyptian lore, Australian lore, indigenous American folklore. All this stuff is bleeding back to the Pleiades, which is pretty interesting. So there was this war there. This war broke out. Now, if you're in an area of the sky, or you're orbiting a planet, orbiting a sun, and there's another weapon that can be unleashed that can destroy a planet. They had a weapon in this text that for this war that took place in space that can destroy any man on 3 worlds. It was a planetary destroyer. And they said once the weapon was unleashed, it couldn't even be returned or stopped. It couldn't be halted in any kind of way. It's deadly stuff. And one of these weapons were controlled by a tablet of destiny. And whoever had control of the tablet of destiny had control of the whole galaxy. It was crazy stuff going on back then. This is an ancient text. And imagine you're there on Earth, right? Let's say this happened in our solar system and Mars blew up. Well, we would be looking, how can we get off this planet? Because if a chunk of Mars hits us, we're toast. So everyone who could in that region of the sky, in that sector of the galaxy, everyone who had the ability to, got in their ships, and they got the hell out of there. They became space refugees. The very first account of refugees. They were looking for planets. They hopped on some planets orbiting the stars of Orion, some orbiting in the Sirius star system, some orbiting in Ursa Minor, Aldebaran, and of course, some came here to Earth. These were all breakaway civilizations. Some even landed on a planet named Nibiru that orbited a brown dwarf star, according to the Enuma Elish. So we're talking about beings that were like we got to keep our civilization and our race alive. We got to spread out and find other places to live.
We're talking about ancient technology, and I don't want to use the word weapons, but your thoughts on something like the Ark of the Covenant. Is it a technology? What is the Ark of the Covenant is that something you've looked at?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Ark of the Covenant is definitely technology. As a matter of fact, if you look on YouTube and just like search for professors, scientists recreate the Ark of the Covenant, you'll find several videos of actual, professors at university and even some scientists and researchers recreating the Ark. One of them recreated the Ark. I forget what state it was in America, but it drew so much power they had to shut it down, and they only recreated it exactly from the instructions in the Bible. Okay, so this thing is a machine, nothing to do with spirits. It'll take your spirit. Okay, if you read the Bible, you find out that the person who handled the ark had to have on rubber boots, special gloves, special clothing, and breastplates. Why? Because this thing was electric and it was also potentially radioactive. If you didn't have on all these specific things in your clothing, what would happen when you touched it? You would die instantly in most cases. And so only special people who knew how to handle it and knew how to wear the right clothing could actually handle it and move it around. And there was more than one Ark of the Covenant. There were actually about 12 of the Arks of the Covenant. One of the Arks of the Covenant was located inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid at Giza. And the box, the rose granite box that held it, is not something that was built at the time the pyramid was built. It was something that was added to the structure later. Still thousands of years old, but it was added much later. And why was that? Well, the Great Pyramid started losing its ability to generate power. It's a power generator. And the reason why is because the Nile started meandering away from the Great Pyramid. The water that from the Nile that would run underneath the Great Pyramid used to bring or create something called physiostatic electricity when you run moving water under crystal granite. The ions would come up into the Grand Gallery and then get stepped up or amped up, going up the king's through the Grand Gallery into the king's chamber, and then from there there'd be some type of fusion that would occur, and it would shoot up through the apex, and then the obelisks, the crystal granite obelisks, would collect that ambient energy. And if you were nearby with something called a JED, a DJED, they have these all throughout Egypt in images. They look like Tesla coils. They have cables coming out of them in the hieroglyphs connected to electric devices like light bulbs, gold electroplating devices, looms. They had all that back then from wireless electricity. Well, when Nile started meandering away from the right up from the Great Pyramid and meandering back, no water. The technology started to get broken. The big pyramid machine started breaking. They realized if they put the ark inside the king's chamber, it can still generate power through the apex. So the ark was a crucial part of fixing a broken power generator. And the evidence of this is that rose granite box is the exact same dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant. It was never meant to be a sarcophagus. I can't even fit in the box. I'm 6'4". I can't lay in that thing. So, okay. And then there's a huge chunk in the corner that's broken off, a massive piece of solid rose granite, and it flew across the room inside the king's chamber about 20 feet and hit a wall and indented the granite in that wall to the same shape as the piece that broke off. Letting you know that, wow, something shot this across. There was an explosion in here. We're talking about a fusion generator system. That's what the Ark of the Covenant was used for.
The engineer in me can't help but start nerding out on material science when it starts to just all the different materials, because the pyramid's forming as a Helmholtz resonator as well. Like the fact that, and for those that don't know Helmholtz resonator, it's like when you've got a bottle and you can sort of blow in it and a tune starts to play. The pyramids behave the same way, but it's very difficult to engineer something to that degree, at that scale. Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to tell you something interesting that nobody talks about. Everybody thinks that the Great Pyramid is made from cookie cutter stone blocks. In other words, somebody went to a quarry, cut these blocks, and we're going to just stack them up like Legos. Sorry. When you go to the pyramid like I have and you stand in front of it, you're in awe. You know why? Because every stone is like a fingerprint. There are no two stones alike. Every single block is made custom for the location it's in, because the Great Pyramid are 2 million blocks of interlocking pieces of a puzzle. It's not a stacked up Lego system. It's actually interlocking stones. They have an interlocking structure, which is why it can withstand earthquakes and everything else through all these eons. And every stone is made specifically for where it sits. In other words, you can't take the resources and energy to cut a block, drag it across the desert on tree rollers, roll it up mud ramps, supposedly, which is impossible, and get it into place and go, damn it, this doesn't really fit here. No, didn't do it that way. They knew exactly where each stone was going to go, and they had a method and technique for putting it where it needed to go when they needed it there, and we still can't figure that out.
And yeah, there's even just the awareness, and this is where I continue to get baffled, is like the awareness that the limestone used on the outer elements are insulative, but limestone
Insulative.
used in the inner elements are conductive. And it's like,
Yes.
how who know? Like, I didn't know that. I still don't really know that. You know, like, I only learned that because I was studying the pyramids.
Mhm.
Where does that information, like, again, come from? Like, how do these people know? And also, like, you know, as you're describing, like someone handling the Ark of the Covenant, like, you know, there being the need to sort of, again, material science, like they're knowing what to use in order to handle things correctly, sort of blows your mind in terms of what we currently know and what we would like had have known had we not had some of these cataclysmic events. Um,
Right.
I'm conscious of the time we've got. One of the really quick questions I've got is, well, not a quick question, but you've got potentially beings here for 400,000, 200 to 250,000 years ago. I came across somewhere in your work that Adam and Eve potentially weren't alone in the garden.
Mhm.
And I found that
Oh, yeah.
extremely fascinating because I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think this is a really important conversation. Yeah, can you elaborate on that? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You know, unfortunately, the dogma that has been passed down for so many generations, the fact that they're thinking that two people created 8 billion people on Earth right now is where we're at, about 8 billion, 8 billion, 100 million, or some crazy number, right? A crazy number we're at. But the fact is, two people can't create 8 billion people because why? Not enough genetic diversity. And whoever doesn't believe that, I want you to go and start mating with your sister and have a baby, and then have that baby, and you have two babies, and have those babies grow up a little bit and mate with each other, and see what happens by the second or third generation. Club feet, mental disabilities, blindness, all these things happen. Why? No genetic diversity. This is why people who like breed dogs and everything, they understand they have to have a genetic pool to pull from to create these breeds of dogs and everything else. Same thing with human beings. You have to have a genetic diversity. So when you look at these tablets, you begin to realize something else really happened. First of all, Isis was trying to create the Adamu. That means first man, right? Isis. Now, what's crazy is they're trying to do this, and they're having some trouble mating these clones. And the instructions for the cloning are in the hieroglyphs in Egypt, right? So you go there to Egypt, and all of a sudden you see these hieroglyphs, and they lay out the exact cloning technique to make people, actual people like you and I. And we take people there every year to show them these incredible hieroglyphs. But the problem that they had was these clones in the tablets, they weren't able to reproduce. If you take a lion and a tiger, you get a ligon, right? Or a tigon. You can do them both ways. But neither one of those outcomes can actually have be fertile. They can't. One can't get pregnant, another it can't make anything pregnant, right? If it's a man or a woman, a female or a male. I'm sorry. So the problem that you have there is they can't really mate. Just like a donkey and a horse will create a mule, but the mule is sterile. Same situation. So they said, "Dan, what are we gonna do?" So she said, I have an idea. I'm gonna take the egg from one of the beings and put it in my womb and take it to term." So they take one of the hominids, they take a female, they take the egg out, they add their essence to it. This is some type of a genetic modification or adding the sperm or whatever they did. Kind of like in modern terms, making a zygote in modern terms in a laboratory to insert into a woman's womb, in vitro fertilization. She puts it in her womb. She takes it to term for 10 months, not 9. And in 10 months, she gives birth to the Adamu. That means first man. And her, there's a cylinder seal in the British Museum with her holding the baby up, saying, "My hands have created it." This begins the generations of Isis. The generations of Isis, the Genesis, the Genesis, the book of Genesis. This is where it comes from. Now they go, okay, let's mate Adam with one of these clones. Didn't work. They were like, damn, this didn't work. I go, okay, we go back to the drawing board. Let's make an Eve. Let's make a female version of Adam. So they do that through birth, through the birth canal, through an actual pregnancy, give birth to Eve. Now they mate Adam with Eve. And then, of course, she gets pregnant and conceives. They go, oh, we got it. So now they begin this process in the Hathor's birthing houses of having these women dedicating their bodies to being surrogate mothers to give birth to all these children. And they raise these children. They put them in the Eden, the Edin, where Satan was the ruler or the king of Eden. Okay, Satan. And in there, they had mating times. They had these people in there, and you couldn't mate out of turn, and you would be punished. You had to mate with who specifically they told you to mate with. Why? Because if you don't, you can screw up the genetic diversity. So they had these mating times. They had people in there who would try to mate out of turn. They would get in trouble. And the fact that there were a lot of people on this planet is also provable in the Bible, because when Cain killed his brother, and Enlil, who's known as Yahweh in the Bible, but he's Enlil in the Sumerian tablets, he comes back and he goes, oh man, what'd you do? You killed him? I'm kicking you out of here. So Cain says, wait a minute. The people out there will kill me. Well, what people? What people are out there? It's supposed to be Adam, Eve, Cain and Abel, and their sister. That's it. No, there wasn't anybody else. But no, he said there's people out there, multiple. Some, they will kill me. These must be violent people. So God says, no, it's okay. I'll put my mark on you, and they won't touch you because they'll know you're my boy. So he puts this mark, but the mark he put is not a mark on his face or a cut, a genetic marker. And he released him. That began the creation of the Canaanites. So yeah, this whole Garden of Eden thing had been misconstrued for hundreds of years, and people preaching dogma that Adam and Eve and original sin, and the apple that she ate was the apple of knowledge. She was given knowledge by Enlil, who's known as Yahweh, his brother Enki. His brother Enki came to the garden and started telling them that they're wise, that they're intelligent, that they're created even higher than them, that they are higher than the Anunnaki themselves, that the secrets to the universe are hidden inside of our bodies. All this can be found in the myth of Adapa. It's an amazing deciphered Sumerian cuneiform tablet that anyone can buy. You can buy it on Amazon and read it for yourself. How it talks about how great and how grand we are, that the wisdom of all knowledge has been encoded into the human body form. And when they learned this information, they realized that they weren't animals, and they began to put on clothes. And then when Enlil comes back, he gets pissed off because he realized they've been enlightened in some way. And then he began to say, he's the devil, he's evil. But it really was Enlil that was the evil one, not Enki.
Goodness me. There is, yeah, I think even just the genetic diversification conversation, it's such a low-hanging thread that we don't usually just pull on. Just it's interesting. Human, like we just don't question our stories, and yet they govern so much of our lives. Do you think we're entering? Because I heard you, very dear friend of mine, Alex Ferrari, Next Level Soul. You were talking about us entering a golden age, but ultimately the challenge being sustaining a golden age. I think that was very, very interesting. I'd love to just get your thoughts on that once again here, because I think that was, in your mind. I'll let you answer the question.
Absolutely. Shout out to Alex Ferrari, great human being. Great human being, man. Love him. So basically I was talking about the fact that we're living in this cycle, the cycle of the yugas, right? Where you go through this rise and fall of civilizations. They call it the Great Year. That's a more modern name for it, the Great Year. And through this process of going through this dark age, right? And this Stone Age, and coming around to the Bronze Age, and then moving into like a Silver Age and heading back to a Golden Age. Right now, I feel like we're in something called a Tetra Yuga, which is the very, very beginning of a silver age. We're in the very, very beginning of that. And mankind is moving in the right direction up this circle back towards a golden age. Now we're still quite a ways away from being in a golden age, but at least we're on the right side of the cycle. Now, every time I read these ancient texts, these scriptures, papyruses, cylinder scrolls, verbal handed down histories, and study this information, I see these cycles. They exist. Everyone knows about these cycles of rise and fall of civilization. Thoth talks about it in the Emerald Tablets. But nowhere has it been written that mankind has to go through this cycle, that we have to fall, that any civilization on any planet has to ever fall. And since it's not written that it has to fall, it's not a universal law that has to happen. In my opinion, could there be a program going on, an experiment, a grand experiment? How many known civilizations throughout this universe will eventually break this cycle and reach a golden age and actually sustain it? And I believe that's the ultimate goal for humanity and mankind on this planet, is to finally stop going through this cycle they call the Great Year and actually get to a golden age and actually sustain a golden age, sustain the wisdom, sustain the knowledge, and keep it and stay in the age versus cycling back, crashing, and doing it all over again in this big loop. It's like a reincarnation. It's like a fractal of our reincarnation cycle. Can we stop it? Thoth claimed to have broken out of the reincarnation cycle. So if he can do that, and that's a fractal of the whole, as above, so below, well, that means to me then we can stop this cycle, this fractal of this rise and fall of civilizations and achieve a golden age and actually sustain it. I think that's the ultimate goal in this grand universal experiment, is how to actually get there and keep it. And the grand experiment could be, as I said, how many civilizations throughout the known universe will destroy themselves before they get a chance to, how many will get stuck in the cycle eternally, and how many will break the cycle and sustain it.
It's almost like an escape velocity that we're trying to achieve through awakening our consciousness so that we can actually sustain. Well, almost, yeah, like a golden age sounds somewhat paradisical. Sounds pretty
There's
amazing.
a reason why I believe this might be the cycle that we can sustain it versus other cycles. Other cycles have been around on this planet when the planet wasn't as stable in terms of geology, in terms of comets and asteroids, right? So we're in a position now where we can actually, geologically, we're not in a bad position. We've overcome we're in a window of opportunity where we've overcome a lot of these things that can destroy us. We've also been able to begin to develop technologies that can shift the orbits of asteroids and comets, something we potentially have not been able to do before. This mission was launched, I think, 10 years ago to land on an asteroid or a comet and asteroid and move it, shift it by using thrusters to shift the orbit to see if you could change the orbit so that something can miss the Earth. And now, within the next few years, we'll perfect that technology, right? The next 10 years, maybe 20 max. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking we're getting to a point now where we can stop objects from striking the planet, right? We can evade things. We potentially can even learn how to build force fields and all these incredible technologies that we're able to develop now in this age and still maintain the conscious ascending. And I think that we can get to a point by the time we get, towards this golden age, that we could be in a position where no geological, no disaster from space, and of course, no, negative frequency can come and destroy us.
Billy, there's so much that you're putting out into the world. There's obviously your books, the Compendium of the Emerald Tablets. There's so much available there. There's Forbidden Knowledge TV. My goodness, there is so much going on in there. There's plenty of work of yours on Gaia as well. You've got your social media channels where you're sharing yourself so abundantly with the world. You've got your podcast and interviews. There's work. There's so much for someone that wants to scratch. This is just a scratch of the surface. For those that want to go deeper, what would be your recommendation? Where could they start?
My biggest recommendation literally is to go to 4bk.tv, the number 4bk.tv, or go to your app store and get the Forbidden Knowledge, the number 4, Forbidden Knowledge TV app, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, iOS App Store, Google Play, Samsung or LG TV. and start watching over 3,800 pieces of content on there that are designed to enlighten, to educate, to uplift, everything from mental health, psychiatry, psychotherapy, health, wellness, and of course, ancient civilizations, technology, and even sciences, all on Forbidden Knowledge TV.
I want to thank you for your time and energy here today. Of course, thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly and humoring me and entertaining me with all my questions. Hopefully, everyone got a ton of value out of that. Yo, inspired soul, you made it through to the end of another episode. Thank you so much for your inspirations to evolve. As always, I'd love to thank all of you that have subscribed to the channel. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. We recently hit 100,000 subscribers, touchwood, and all that love is not lost on me. I really appreciate all your incredible love and support. To all of you that are considering subscribing, please do take a moment. Obviously, you're loving these episodes. You've made it all the way through to the end. Take a moment, please hit the subscribe button just below. It helps so much more than we can say, championing love, positivity, and wisdom around the world through this humble channel and this offering. All you have to do is hit subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and it helps with everything we're doing here. And now on screen, luminaries that play in the same space as Billy. We've got Greg Braden, we've got Bruce Lipton, and we've got Nassim Haramein. Incredible individuals, epigenetics, quantum physicists, quantum healing. I'll put episodes with them on screen now. If you want to continue your inspirations to evolve further, please take your pick, make your click, and I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, stay inspired, keep evolving, onwards, upwards, and inwards. See you in the next one.